I'll start verse 1. Woe to those at ease in Sion, and those trusting in Mount Shomron, the distinguished ones among the chiefs of the nations to whom the house of Israel comes. This connects with what we read in John 4 or Yahuchanan chapter 4. So let me go there for a moment. So here, you see how it says, woe to those at ease in Sion. Sion is the main mountain of Jerusalem. And those trusting in Mount Shomron. Shomron, the mountain there was the Mount Gerizim. So when we go to John 4, we read that it says, the woman said to him, Sovereign, I see that you are a prophet. That's when he was talking to the Shomroni, the woman Shomroni. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain. So they were on the mountain of Shomron, Gerizim, Mount Gerizim. But you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where one needs to worship. So Sion. So that is like saying our fathers, those of Shomron, worshipped on Gerizim, which represents a malach, a certain malach, that being mainly Samael. But you people, the Yahudim, say that in Jerusalem, meaning Mount Zion or Sion, which in this case, when it comes to the physical, to the literal, to that representation, it would represent Halel. So it is like saying our fathers said to worship Samael, the Malach, Samael, whom you use in the beginning of time. But you people say that Halel is the one that you should worship, because she's focused on the material, the mountain, while it represents something spiritual, because being focused on the material, the creation, instead of the creator, made people worship the angels instead of the creator of those angels, the angels that Yahweh used for many things. So since first ruled death, and then came the law and the prophets, but then Mashiach came with the favor and the truth, that means that before Mashiach, there were two different administrations on this earth represented by those two mountains. So depending on the doctrine that people were taught, that's whom they would worship. And that was represented by the place where they would go to worship. So Mashiach came to change things. And there were two main doctrines regarding where to go worship. And here we see this female asking the question because she wants to know what is the true doctrine, pretty much. Whom should we worship? So our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where one needs to worship. I wonder if Yahushua said, you people? Right? So what do you mean, you people? So anyways, verse 21, Yahushua said to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you shall neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. So that is saying you won't worship through this angel or that angel. You will worship him directly through the Son, but that's directly enough. So you worship what you do not know. That is pretty much saying or confirming what I was just mentioning regarding the interpretation of what she was asking. Not that she knew what she was asking, just what the Ruach through her was saying into us. So you worship what you don't know. So they were worshiping. Look how she's asking about the place where they should worship. And Yahushua was talking about who they worship or what they worship. So she asked, where should we worship? Mashiach tells her, you don't know who you worship. So in a way, what does it matter where? if you don't really know what you're doing. So they were worshiping angels. That's why Yahushua says you don't know who you're worshiping. You worship what you do not know. We, and talking about the Yahudim, we worship what we know, because the deliverance is of the Yahudim, those who are those who praise Yahweh. But the hour is coming, and now is. The hour was coming because Mashiach was going to die for our sins, and now is because he was already there to do it, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father, the true worshipers. So before this hour, there were no true worshipers. Or I'll explain why I said that after we read the rest. But we could say before Mashiach, there were true worshipers. They just didn't know what they were worshiping, right? Abraham was a true worshiper, of course. Isaac, Jacob, and many others, of course. But they did not know really whom they were worshiping, or through whom they were communicating with the Father. So, but the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and truth. So before Yahushua, because look how he's saying, the hour is coming, and now is. So it was just that hour. It was just that time. That means that before that time, they didn't worship in spirit and truth, but they worshiped in flesh and deceit or lies. And not that they, well, not all, but not that they did it on purpose, teach lies. Some did, of course, but they were being taught by an angel whom they thought was the Father. But now that the Son comes to reveal the true Father, then people will worship the way it was supposed to be, in spirit and truth, not on Gerizim or Sion, not on Shomron or Jerusalem, but in spirit and truth. For the Father also does seek such to worship him. So look how after he explains this about the hour is coming and now is, look what the woman says next. The woman said to him, I know that that Messiah is coming. I know that Mashiach is coming. So she starts to wonder, is he the Messiah? Is that the reason why he's saying that the hour is coming and now is? So the one who is called anointed, when that one comes, he shall announce to us all. Yahushua said to her, I, who am speaking to you, am he. So, going back to Amos, woe to those that is in Sion. Look at how it is the prophet Amos before Mashiach, and the Almighty was already speaking against those angels and against the doctrines that the leaders of this world teach that makes people follow those angels as Elohim. Woe to those that is in Sion and those trusting in Mount Shomron. The fact that it says trusting in the Mount Shomron is interesting, because one does not trust in a mountain. Angel represented by the mountain, Gerizim. They will go to that place to worship, thinking that the place was set apart spiritually, and therefore they would be set apart as well. Not understanding that it doesn't matter the place, Yahweh is everywhere. So, woe to those that is in Sion and those trusting in Mount Shomron. So they are trusting the place instead of the mighty one. They are trusting an angel instead of the creator. The distinguished ones among the chiefs of the nations, right? They are mainly those at ease, and the ones teaching the rest to trust in a place or an angel, to whom the house of Israel comes. right? The people of Israel would come to them and they would teach them lies. Pass over to Calneh and see, and from there go to Hamath the Great. Then go down to Gad of the Philistines. Are you better than these regions, or is their border greater than your border? So not only did they think that the place was more set apart than other places. Remember, like we read not long ago in the book of Second Kings, when Naaman went to be healed by Elishua, and then when he was healed, he asked for a little bit of soil so he could build an altar with that soil from that land, because he thought that would make it so that the mighty one would look upon him, not understanding really at that moment that Yahweh is almighty and he's everywhere. He sees all things. So now is mentioning these other places, like saying, compare, see that they are similar. In certain cases, they're even more fruitful or prettier for whatever reason. Sometimes, for instance, Sodom and Gomorrah was like a garden of Eden, was like a paradise. But because of the sin of the people, it was destroyed by fire, and it wasn't the same place ever again. Yahweh will make everything new, but ever since that, nothing grows there. So Yahweh is telling them pretty much that they should not be so boastful about them being the chosen or about them having the promised land, because the sin of the people could destroy it as it has. So pass over to Calneh and see, and from there go to Hamath the Great, then go down to Gad of the Philistines. So let me, since we're seeing several names here, let me go real quick over here. So, well, we already saw Sion and Shomron, but we didn't mention the name. So Sion is a parched place, a sunny place, a sunny mountain. That's how they translate it. I wouldn't be surprised if it has more to it, of course. If we go to this word Sion, which would be the root of it, a signpost, a monument, market. So that's very different, right? Already. A pillar. So that's why it is a mountain, Sion, and Yahweh made it as a pillar, as Yakin, where Mashiach would be sacrificed, as a signpost of the changing of times, salvation, and a bunch of other things, of course. Look how it says Sion, from the same as Siyah, dryness, drought, desert. So that's why Sion, they translate it as parched place or sunny mountain. But if we see the other word that they mention as a root, in the sense of conspicuousness, yes, compare Natsach, which is triumph, to excel, to be bright, be preeminent, be perpetual, be overseer, be enduring. Shine, to be bright. So the sun, that's why sunny land, because the sun would shine on it and make it parched or dry, as the other word mentioned. But Netzach means triumph as well, to excel, to be bright, etc. So that connects with Mashiach, who came to get triumph for us over sin, over death, on Sion. So the root of it connects with Mashiach. They also translate it most of the times as musician. That was Sion. Then Shomron, a watch mountain. They put mountain because it was a mountain, but has to do with watching, with guarding, pertaining to a watch. We see here Shamar, which is the verb for to guard, to keep, observe. So they were supposed to guard the Torah, yet they failed, just like the Yehudim as well, sadly. So then we have here Kalne, the fortress of Anu. Kalne, fortress of Anu. Anu was a false deity, of course, seen as the god of heaven. Anu, like the Anunnaki, as in the one above Enki and Enlil. So that connects with Samael, Azazel, and Halel, right? Those three. So that would be Kalne, the fortress of Anu. So you see how it is comparing. Let me go to Amos here. Comparing Sion and Shomron to Kalne and Hamat, God of the Philistines. So I already mentioned the connection between Sion and Shomron with Halel and Samael, and I was mentioning other places where they would worship the same entities. Kalne, they would worship Samael or Halel, depending on the opinion. And of course, also we will have to see the whole story, but because of the way they put it, Anu was above Enlil and Enki, or before, and in the sense of before, Samael was before the other two Satans. So that is Kalne right there. Then Hamat, which is fortress. Remember that Halel was called the god of fortresses. So he will be El Hamat, another way of putting it. So that Anu as Samael, now Hamat as Halel. Because of that I just mentioned, the god of fortresses, that they call him. Also interesting that Ham was the name of the bad son of Noah, and it's also the another name for the sun, for it burns, heats. So we know that the sun is the morning bright star, the morning star, which is mentioned in Isaiah 14, referring to Halel, right? And the Tav has the cross, first letter of Tammuz, which would be also a false messiah. Then after Hamat mentions Gat is the wine press, right? Where the many will go. But also remember that the pronunciation, it is almost as with a Dalit, God for fortune, in this case, God for wine press. And those who worship God, sadly, will end up in the wine press, as we see in Revelation 14, right? So because of worshiping God, they will end up in a wine press. That's why Yahweh mentions these names here in comparison to those who would trust in Sion or Gerizim, thinking that they were saved, unlike those of the nations that were worshiping Anu and God and Hamat. So then he mentions Philistine, which is immigrants. So God of the immigrants. It is also interesting that Philistines is where they nowadays get Palestine, right? Which is the name they give to Israel. Palestine from the Philistines, and it means immigrants. Remember that those who claim to be Jews are not really descendants of Israel, at least not most of them. They are not descendants of Israel, yet they are in Israel claiming it is their land. So in fact, they would be immigrants. So God of the immigrants will be their mighty one, the mighty one of those who claim to be the Yahudim but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So another connection that shows that God, in this case, would represent Satan, right? So Now let me go to Amos. Pass over to Calneh and see. And from here go to Hamad the Great. Then go down to God of the Philistines. Are you better than these reigns? Or is their border greater than your border? You who are putting off the day of evil, yet bring near the seat of violence. Beautiful verse. You who are putting off the day of evil, right? There are a lot of people, like for instance, even death. A lot of people do not even want to talk about death as if it didn't exist, thinking that that's gonna make it not happen or something, right? To avoid it, to avoid thinking about it, or just accepting that it is something that exists in this reality. And I understand for people who do not have a faith and who do not believe that there's a life afterwards, I kind of understand it. And even, of course, those who love this life and this reality, I obviously understand it. But those who are evil, are the ones who are fearing hell, punishment, etc. So they are doing everything in their everything they can, not only in their hearts, their minds, by avoiding thinking about it, about the book of Revelations, about obviously the apocalypse, the end times, consequences for their actions, etc. But also there are some people like those in the Illuminati and those with CERN and all of that who are trying to stop time or make a loop of time so that it doesn't end. They're trying to stop Yahweh, they think, from bringing the punishment they deserve. Right? Remember that he was talking to the chief, the distinguished ones among the chief of the nations. Obviously, in that moment, Israel as the chief of the nations, the distinguished ones, those leaders. But remember that the enemy wants to rule the new world order from the same place. So it is turning it, the idea is to turn it into the chief of the nations. Right now, or for a long time, they have been controlling it through London, Washington, D.C., and the Vatican. But then it says, you who are putting off the day of evil, yet bring near the seat of violence. So they are trying to stop the day of evil, but they keep doing the violence. They are the ones killing everybody and doing so much evil, not understanding that the only way to stop evil from manifesting is fulfilling the commandments. The way to stop evil from having power over us is to turn ourselves to the mighty one, through whom we can do all things, through Mashiach who strengthens us. So the enemy won't have power over us, and we would defeat him. But if they use the enemy, if they work with the enemy, if they ask the enemy for help, how can they expect the enemy not to continue in this reality doing what he's doing? So these people who worship the enemy, they want control over the whole world and over the rest of the people. So they want to stop what Yahweh is doing, what he is about to do in the end times. Yet they do everything except the one thing that could stop that. So in fact, they bring it near, they make it happen. It is because of them that that day is coming. You who are putting off the day of evil, yet bring near the seat of violence, who are lying on beds of ivory and are stretched out on your couches, and are eating lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stall. See how it mentions lambs and calves, like the first and the last. Pesach, Yom Kippur. Right? Those who are eating well, who are comfortable in their mansions, thinking that nothing will ever happen to them. And of course, there are some people who got that in a righteous way. So good for them. And hopefully they will enjoy the time that there's left. But most of those did not get those riches in the right way. So eventually they will have to pay for everything that they did. So who are singing to the sound of the harp, having composed songs for themselves like David, right? Like King David. Verse 5, who are singing to the sound of the harp, having composed songs for themselves like David. Who are drinking wine from bowls and anoint with the finest ointments, yet they have not been paying over the breach of Joseph. The breach of Joseph. See how it says in Hebrew? Al Shever Joseph. Interesting that this word right here, let me write it in translator. You see that it is the same, yet it is not translating it, but it's the breach of Joseph. This, you see how this bar right here, that can be translated as son. You see it right here. Oh, come on. Do it again. She bar Joseph. So the breach of Joseph, but this right here, like I mentioned, the bar can be translated as son, right? She, the shin, put in front of something can be translated as there is. So there is a son in Joseph, or there is a son of Joseph. We could see from here. And as we know, the last is a descendant of Joseph, just like the first, Yahushua is a descendant of Yahudah. The two tribes from whom Yahweh would manifest, two tribes mentioned in Genesis 49. Well, many other places, but in Genesis 49, there's a prophecy regarding the coming of the first and the last. So we can see that in the Hebrew. Now, like I was reading, who are drinking wine from bowls and anointed with the finest ointments. Look how here he mentions, Yahweh is mentioning David, the king. And now he mentions Joseph in the next verse right away, right? And as we know, like I mentioned, Yahushua came from David. The last comes from Joseph. So we can see this as first and last. But also, remember that Mashiach came to fulfill everything in the, everything in the Torah. But what Yahushua fulfilled spiritually, the last fulfills literally, and vice versa. So David, for instance, when it comes to Joseph, there is no sin mentioned in scriptures regarding Joseph. Scripture doesn't mention a sin that Joseph committed. So even though we know that he committed a sin at a certain point because he's son of man, son of Adam, Yahushua HaMashiach never sinned. So the fact that there's no sin mentioned of Joseph represents the fact that Yahushua would never sin. In David's case, he did sin because we did see it in scriptures, but Yahweh says that he has no sin because he repented with all his heart. So Yahweh doesn't count that sin for him, even though it is mentioned in scriptures. So in that case, he represents the last, who comes as the prodigal son, commits sin, being in the apostasy, but then repents, and Yahweh gives him forgiveness as if he had never sinned. So also Yahushua came as the high priest. The last comes as the king, and David was a king. Joseph as well. So in that sense, and also other things mentioned here in this verse regarding what would happen in the end, mentioned in other prophecies, this would connect with the fact that the Melech Gadol is coming, the great king, from the tribe of Joseph, whom they will kill, whom they will break, because it is the word that appears there, in fact. So who are drinking wine from bowls, I'm going to go back a little bit, who are singing to the sound of the harp. So he's talking about people that sing as well. Because there are people singing worship songs that do not worship the Almighty. And because there are a lot of people making music nowadays that just worship the enemy, just straight up. So mentions how they make songs like David, but unlike David, they make songs to worship somebody else. So who are singing to the sound of the harp, having composed songs for themselves like David, who are drinking wine from bowls and anointed with the finest ointments, yet they have not been paying over the breach of Joseph. Therefore, they shall now go into exile. Now. Therefore, they shall now go into exile with the first of the exiles, and the feasting of the stretched out. And the feasting of the stretched out ones shall cease. So the time is now. Kind of like we just read in John 4, but in a different sense, like pretty much what Amos is prophesying. The time is coming, and now is, as he mentions here, shall now, they will go into exile, and those who are all stretched out, they will stop being so comfortable. So therefore they shall now go into exile with the first of the exiles, and the feasting of the stretched out ones shall cease. Their feasting, not ours. Their feasting. The sovereign Yahweh has sworn by himself. That is something amazing that I think most people don't notice or don't think about, maybe I should say. And Yahweh says it himself, right? Since he cannot, like, he doesn't know any other Elohim. And by saying that, he's not saying that maybe there's another one that I don't know. He's saying there's none, because he knows everything and he knows no other than him, like him. Exactly. So the fact that he has to swear by himself is because normally people swear by somebody bigger than them, higher than them, greater than them. So Yahweh, having nobody else other than him, nobody greater than him, he has to swear by himself. So that is something that happens a lot in scriptures, but I think it's very important because it shows how mighty Yahweh is. And also, he does not need to swear to us anything, but he's humble and he gives us promises and even swears to do things. In this case, also punishment for the wicked, which is a good thing for the righteous, right? So everything that comes from him is good, even punishment, even when he punishes us, because he is helping us, because he punishes those whom he loves. So the sovereign Yahweh has sworn by himself. Yahweh Elohim of hosts declares, I am loathing the pride of Jacob. I am loathing the pride of Jacob, and I have hated his palaces. Therefore I shall deliver up the city and all that is in it. See how it mentions Yaakov, the name Yaakov, which represents those who take that which is not theirs, obviously in the negative sense. Supplanters, how they translate it in the concordance. Usurper. So the sovereign Yahweh has sworn by himself, Yahweh Elohim of hosts declares, I am loathing the pride of Yaakov. Yahweh hates pride, no matter who it comes from. And you know that what I mentioned earlier regarding those who claim to be Yahudim, but they are not Israelites because they did not come from Jacob, but they claim to be Jacob. So Yahweh hates them because not only they claim to be somebody they are not, but they are prideful while claiming to be the chosen. I am loathing the pride of Jacob, and I have hated his palaces. Therefore I shall deliver up the city and all that is in it. And it shall be that if 10 men remain in one house, they shall die. Even if they are old men, which they could defend the house, right? They will all die. Even if they are 10, which is a perfect number, they will all die. Even if they claim to have the 10 commandments, the Torah, if they don't have Mashiach, they shall all die. And if an uncle or his undertaker brings the remains out of the house, he shall say to one inside the house. Listen to this, because this is an interesting verse, important as well. So it just said, it shall be that if 10 men remain in one house, they shall die. Like I said, one would think, right, being men strong, that they would be able to protect at least their house, a house, but they will all die. That's how the enemy will enter Israel and the rest of the world through the plagues that come in the end times. And if an uncle, which can be translated also, and if a loved one, because uncle comes from beloved, it is actually the same as David, just pronounced different. Dot. Let me see verse 10. Dodo, his uncle. Dod, you see that is David right there. Remember verse 5, it mentioned David. If we go to verse 5. Oh, that's interesting. Because in this case, something that normally doesn't happen, they added the U. To show the eye of David, pretty much. So so that was the name David right there. So, and if an uncle and if a beloved one or his undertaker brings the remains out of the house, he shall say to one inside the house, is anyone with you? And he says, no. Then he shall say, hush, for we have not remembered the name of Yahweh. Look at that. We just mentioned how, well, in the beginning, I was talking about how they worship God, the God of the immigrants, not understanding the day after the enemy, Satan. Worshiping like they were worshiping in Sion and Shomron. So because of that, they will what was the, let's see, well, God, that was a wine press, right? So because of worshiping God, they will go into the wine press, as in Revelation 14 during the harvest. Then it makes reference to the last by mentioning David and Joseph. And then mentions the pride of Jacob, as in those who take the place of Israel. And also, of course, like I have mentioned, the many are represented by Jacob, for they do not accept the name of Mashiach, Yahushua, just like Jacob received the name Israel. So Yahweh calls them Jacob here, instead of the name that he received. But they didn't. The people didn't. They remained as supplanters instead of those who would rule like the mighty one, because of worshiping God instead of Yahweh. Because as it says here, hush, for we have not remembered the name of Yahweh. That's why there were 10 men in a house and they all died. Because even if there are 10 men in the sense of, as we see in Matthew 24, Luke 17, Mark 13, that one will be taken, one will be left behind. The one that is left behind, he's receiving the mark of the beast. The one that is taken, he's taken to die. There was another person that was before the other two that fled. He was saved. So those who get the mark of the beast, they will get it for several reasons, but one of the main, not to die. But once they get it, they will be condemned forever. So in fact, that will be their eternal death. So even if one person gets the mark and keeps breathing for a little bit, he's dead once he takes the mark. So, and it shall be that if 10 men remain in one house, they shall die. And if an uncle, beloved, or his undertaker brings the remains out of the house of those 10 that died, he shall say to one inside the house, is anyone with you? And he says, no. Then he shall say, hush, for we have not remembered the name of Yahweh. So because of not remembering the name of Yahweh, it is that they will go through that. And let me see another, because there are several translations, I think, with the same verse. 10, let me go to King James, for instance. It says, then it shall come to pass that if 10 men remain in one house, they shall die. And when a relative of the dead, with one who will burn the bodies, the undertaker, and you see how it mentions burning the bodies. Ah, come on. With one who will burn the bodies, picks up the bodies to take them out of the house. Yeah, that was key, because that was what kind of got me stuck in the other one. Picks up the bodies to take them out of the house, or it should be literal bones, picks up the bones to take them out of the house. He will say to one inside the house, are there any more with you? Then someone will say, none. And he will say, hold your tongue, for we dare not mention the name of Yahweh. Right? This is I believe a lot better, and then I'll see it in the Hebrew. That was verse 10. So if one carries his uncle outside, his bones from the house, and says, there's someone in the house left with him, with whomever is still alive in the house, which that's interesting, because remember that it said if there are 10, they will all die. But then when somebody comes to pick up the bodies, there's somebody answering, the one who came to pick up the bodies, right, in the house. And he's asked, is there anybody else? And he says, no. So a couple ways of seeing it, right? Could be somebody that, I mean, they come together and one's asking the other to check the house if there's anybody else other than the bodies. But that could also confirm what I was mentioning regarding those who get the mark of the beast. They will still talk, but they will be eternally dead, because they are condemned by just getting the mark of the beast. Hopefully that's understood, because it said that everybody died. And it shall be that if 10 men remain in one house, they shall die. And if an uncle or his undertaker, right, referring to those who take the body. And I think it refers to, like, they came for, well, yeah, those bodies that were killed here. Brings the remains out of the house, he shall say to one inside the house. So like I was saying, that one inside the house, who is he? He could be another one of the undertakers taking the bodies out, but it could be referring to somebody within the house that was from the house and got the mark of the beast. So he is pretty much dead, no matter if he is still speaking. But the reason why they were all killed is mentioned afterwards at the end in this verse. So it says, if there is anyone with you, then he says 0, none. And then he says, hush, because we do not remember the name of Yahweh. Because we do not remember the name of Yahweh. So it could be said, because we did not remember the name of Yahweh, we are in this pickle, right? We are, everybody's dying, being killed. Or as the other translation says, because the remembrance of it, for instance, one of the best ways to remember something is to hear it, right? So one of the ways to remember the name of Yahweh, or keep remembrance of his name, is by invoking the name, telling others about his name and about his deeds, of course. So that's why this other translation says, just a second, take this away. This translation says, are they any more with you? Then someone will say none. And he will say, hold your tongue, for we dare not mention the name of Yahweh. This other translation, which I believe in a way is correct, obviously not this. For we dare not mention the name of Yahweh. That's pretty much saying, do not dare, like shut up, hold your tongue, hush, as the other one said. Do not dare to say the name of Yahweh. Basically saying that if you say it, if you name the name, you will be killed like the other 10. So the pronouncing of his name will get people killed. It is right here, prophesied. Yet people who claim to believe in scripture say it doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter. So I hope that was understood. For we do not remember the name of Yahweh. We did not make memory, remembrance, or mention. And remember that the name Yahushua, the Jews, they turned it into Yeshu, which means, well, it is a Jewish curse that means, may his name and memory be erased. So they connect the name and the memory, because if you forget somebody's name, you start forgetting the rest. The memory of somebody is stuck to his or her name. Hush, for we have not remembered the name of Yahweh. For look, Yahweh is commanding, and he shall strike the great house with breaches, and the little house with clefts. So everybody, big houses, small houses, people great and little, they will all go through it. It's not about how much money people have. It's not about how strong they may be physically. It's not about how much knowledge they may have of the world. It is about good deeds, about loving your neighbor, about doing what Yahweh tells us that we should do as his children. Do horses run on a rock? Does one plow it with oxen? For you have turned right ruling into poison, and the fruit of righteousness into wormwood. As we know, there's a star that falls to the earth during the trumpets that is called wormwood, and it will turn the rivers into poison, as mentioned here, confirming that it is speaking about the book of Revelation, or what the book of Revelation also prophesies about the same time. Do horses run on a rock? Verse 12. He is mentioning the running first. On a rock, the horses. Do run on a rock the horses? Then he mentions the oxen. Once again, remember that Yahushua is the rock, and the enemy is a Zeus, trying to take the place of Mashiach. Then it also mentions the ox or oxen to plow the earth, the land, to grow food, and then the harvest. Once again, as first and last, the horses run on a rock, does one plowed it with oxen. For you have turned right ruling into poison, right? Like it is also written that they would call good evil and evil good. Right ruling into poison, and the fruit of righteousness into wormwood. That's why they will have to drink wormwood. You who are rejoicing over a matter of naught, who say, here, have we not taken horns for ourselves by our own strength? Remember that horns represent strength, power, authority, a crown. As a matter of fact, the word crown comes from the Hebrew that means horns. Keren. Keren is a horn. Keren is the origin of crown. So they have taken power by themselves. You who are rejoicing over a matter of naught, they're rejoicing over something that matters nothing, over something that will pass. Therefore, it's just an illusion. They are rejoicing over vanity. Who say, have we not taken horns for ourselves by our own strength? So they think that they became strong by their own, not understanding that it was Yahweh that allowed them to and gave them anything that they have. Yet, because of the bad deeds, they will be punished and everything will be taken from them because they did not use it well. Have we not taken horns for ourselves by our own strength? For look, I am raising up a nation against you, O house of Israel, declares Yahweh Elohim of hosts. And they shall oppress you from the entrance of Hamat to the Wadi of Arabah. Like I was mentioned, the prophet is talking about something that would happen in their time and perhaps even a little bit after the death of the prophet. But it is mainly referring to what is going to happen in our time, not only to the land of Israel, but to the whole world, although it will focus on Israel at the end. So from the entrance of Hamat to Arabah,